afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. Today is the first day of Earth, Energy, and Environment E3 Conference and Exhibition, second year 2022. My name is Jomana Tariq Abdurrazak. I'm a petroleum engineer, a recent master's degree in petroleum engineering graduate from University of Houston. Currently working as an engineer in Houston, Texas. I have the pleasure to be here with you this afternoon as a member of the Technical Committee of Earth, Energy, and Environment E3 Conference and Exhibition. Today, we're pleased to welcome our invited speakers, one of which is Dr. Iraj Ershaghi. With a long academic experience at the University of Southern California and a rich history of research, Dr. Iraj Ershaghi will be discussing the low-carbon petroleum engineering. This session is being recorded and will be uploaded to our YouTube channel, Petro, where you can also find all of our previous and upcoming sessions in Earth, Energy, and Environment, E3 Conference and Exhibition. Again, that's our YouTube channel, Petro. Please feel free to send your questions in the chat box and we will answer as many questions as possible. With that, I ask you to give your full attention to Dr. Ershaghi and help me in welcoming today's very honorable guest, Dr. Ershaghi. Hi, Dr. Ershaghi. Thank you for joining us today. We're so glad to have you on Earth, Energy, and Environment Student Conference and Exhibition.
Thank you, Jamana Tariq. And I think at the beginning, I'd like to thank Dr. Suleiman for inviting me to be one of the speakers. And I also want to thank the organizing committee putting this whole program together. It's such a tremendous contribution to the student body. And I am really very grateful that I know this is not probably the first year you're doing this, but for all that effort, you have my admiration and respect for the amount of work it takes to put something like that together. And the topic Dr. Suleiman assigned to me is on low carbon petroleum engineering. And so before I get started, let's realize that, especially I'm addressing the engineering community, student community, that energy topic of the day, everybody's talking about it. I know discussion about water, other thing, but even for water, we need energy. So it turns out that without having adequate amount of energy, of course, no other discipline can function. And so the student body in particular who are listening to this discussion should be very proud of the fact that you're pursuing degrees that has to do with energy sustainability, and energy security, and I think these are very, very important fields of study. Let me see if I can change the slides. So we are entering, or actually going into the era of engineering energy, and this is a very exciting area, and it's going to continue. It's not something that's a short age. It's going to be, we're going to go for years to come, because we've just realized how much energy we need. Just realized shortages that may develop, and we just realized that the problem that our country, the U.S. and other countries may have in respect to energy security. Of course, we've seen examples of that in Europe in recent years. So before I get started, let me emphasize that the subject of energy, really more than anything else, has to do with energy security. And energy security is making sure that we have uninterrupted availability of energy at affordable prices. In other words, we'll talk about different sources of energy. If it gets to the point that the society cannot afford it, or people cannot afford it, well, that's a no-no. It's not going to happen. So somehow we have to come up with a way to make sure that any transitions in life, in the way we live, the way we transport ourselves, and the way we conduct our business, it's something we can afford. Because if we cannot afford it, doesn't matter what the source of energy is, that's not very important. Now, the sign of energy security and the dangers it poses in terms of shortages developing is appearing. I live in California, and many of you know California is the state that always, with respect to the question of environmental safety, take the lead. And in fact, we say many things start in California, goes to the other state eventually, getting to the point that right now that um, the uninterrupted advertisement here and there to say that we got to stop the oil production, we got to start with that, and we got to go to renewable. But I mean, I just give you an example that maybe 75-80% of the energy used in California is actually from oil and gas. And of course, if you shut down the oil industry in California, which means you got to import all of that. And we just don't have the import facilities to actually import all that. So as a citizen of this state, actually, I'm concerned that some policy matters, some decisions are made without looking at the consequences of that. And of course, your involvement, the involvement of the student community, the university community, intellectuals, it's very important that we bring to the attention of the decision makers that certain decisions have to be made considering the security and the safety of people and what it takes to actually run the state. Recently, there was a survey conducted from oil and gas firm, and then talking to the executives, got a poll. That do you expect a significant tightening of the oil market by the end of 2024? And of course, 85% said yes. You know what that means is that as long as you have a stigma attached to the oil and gas, then the investment is going to go to other areas. And not having enough investment in the development of new oil and gas resources mean more and more shortages. And more shortages, of course, is not going to be good for the country. Now, as long as we're able to replace those shortages with other sources of energy, that's one thing. But we're not doing that. And I'm going to show you that actually our progress is not as much as we think we should be. And as a result of that, I am very much concerned that some of these shortages of funds that are necessary to invest in oil and gas is going to come even further shortages and further deficiencies in energy availability, and that's going to be devastating, of course, California and to the rest of the nation. But before I get started, let me talk about this organization. Many of you know about IRENA. IRENA stands for International Renewable Energy, formed in 2009, and more than 100 countries are members of that organization. They get about 400 million annually from UAE, but the US and other countries also contribute. So if you go to their website, you can see that they do all kinds of studies about what should be done and what it takes to get to 2050 and all that. Let me review some of these numbers with you. So what is IRENA, based on the predictions they have, say about 2050? That's the magic word, 2050, almost about 30 years from now. They predict that by 2050, the contribution of the renewables, the electrical production, would be going from 20% now, 2017, to 49%. But what's interesting is that they also predict that we're still going to be depending on coal and natural gas and oil. Now that dependency depends how you look at that. Their prediction is 3% coal, 10% natural gas, 13% oil, but the chances are that actually we're going to have a larger percentage coming out because we are not able to progress in the area of the renewables as fast as some of the predictions are. In fact, if you look at this next chart, you can see that if you look at the historical progress that was done from 2015 to 2018, we went from 9.5 to 10.5. And now currently we are going from 70 to 25, but something must be done in order for the Iranians' prediction to be correct, to go actually up, get to about 6%. That's not an easy task to do because it takes a lot of effort, it takes a lot of investment in that area. Also, as a part of their prediction, of course, hydrogen plays an important role. And in spite of some of the problems that we may have in hydrogen production, they're predicting that, by year 2050, we must produce 7,500 terawatt hours of electricity from hydrogen. And of course, all of that requires some significant developments in the area of catalysts and other solutions in terms of containment of hydrogen and transportation of hydrogen. The most important conclusion that they have is that it will take about 130 trillions of US dollars to get to that. Now, of course, money is losing its value, but there's still 130 trillion is a lot of money. And the question is, we can afford that. And that's where the affordability comes. In other words, all of those plans are fine, but by the time you want to change the mode of transportation, by the time you want to change the factories, by the time you want to do that, you need this level of investment to get to that point. And are we able to do that? Now, if you look at the different countries, you can see that some of these countries actually, what they have to spend in terms of billions per year is more than their GDP. They cannot afford it, this area. So that is really the whole question of where is the money going to come from to get to the point that to have that level of dependency on renewables. Now, part of the forecast is also that there has to be a significant change in the industry, in the sense that many of the industries have to change to become low carbon. And this includes, of course, the transportation, the aviation, shipping, many manufacturing processes, chemical, petrochemical, cement in particular. And then, my focus is really, if you take the petroleum industry and look at it, is it doing what it needs to do in order to make it itself a decarbonized industry? So when we talk about decarbonization of petroleum industry, it may sound like an oxymoron, like, how could the petroleum industry that is full of carbon make itself decarbonized? Well, they are doing things, and there are things that could be done. And let's talk about this. Now, when we look at the petroleum industry, of course, we all know that it consists of three parts: the upstream, midstream, and downstream. So there are things that could be done in upstream, and things could be done in transportation, and things could be done in downstream. And actually, as I will show you the list, industry is doing something in all of these areas. So, what are the focus areas? The focus areas that the companies are working is, number one, they are putting pressure on the service companies, the Halliburton, Schlumbergers, and others, to make sure, because most of the services is done by the service companies, to make sure that whatever they're doing is that it has the lowest amount of emission. So they're very careful about it. Number two, the significant opportunities in production operations, from the gas leaf all the way to pneumatics, and sources or equipment, that you be able to actually reduce the gases. And the most importantly is leaving the decision making and the pattern recognition digital techniques rather than human intensive, because by incorporating more digital transformation, actually you're able to have a better control of the operation. Other things that they're doing has to do with basically improving efficiency, for instance, in drilling and using electrification. And then more importantly is that the expertise that the oil and gas companies have, and if you're listening to this presentation, petroleum engineering students have, with the expertise you have for subsurface, this is really the only hope for the world that we be able to go to power plants and get the CO2 and actually inject them subsurface. There's a lot of problems, of course, we have to overcome, and a lot of people in this area. But that's the only hope for the world, that rather than sending the CO2 atmosphere, be able to go to subsurface, and that is exactly what the petroleum machine can help. Now, there are articles here and there talking about, idle and abandoned wells that are emitting methane and other greenhouse gases. And of course, some of these wells are at locations that you may not even know. So the whole question is that why don't we monitor these systems, and why do we come up with the ways to know when the level of emission has reached to some critical values? So the other important thing is that it's been practiced, still being practiced in many parts of the world, that if you don't have a market for natural gas, you flare it, you burn it, and of course that by itself is pollution. Now, many companies, of course, in the U.S. are switching to using the natural gas, and I can talk about some of these technology they're using. So, what can we do about, excuse me, flaring? And so, the other thing, of course, is that when you have equipment that's maybe actually sending some fugitive emission, that you may have a problem with that. What can you do to control that? So, among all of that, of course, is improving the energy efficiency of the operations that we do. Now, the electrification of oil field is one of the areas, especially in the drilling operation, that we can exercise and try to make sure that we are not releasing greenhouse gases, by using more efficient power system. So whether it's in drilling or in production, there are opportunities in upstream production that we can actually improve and making sure that we are decarbonizing the operation to the extent we can. And the flaring operation, as I said, there's a lot of progress made, whether they're using the gas that's being emitted, the gas that you have a market for, whether using injection for technically or enhanced recovery, whether you're compressing it, selling it, whether you're making liquefied natural gas, whether chemical, or you're making power. That's a very popular way. Actually, you can have these small turbines that actually use the natural gas and power out. So it's having flaring in oil fields becoming a no-no, and this is gradually the industry adopting technologies to overcome that issue. Other solution strategies that I mentioned, another one is basically the idle wells. I'm going to talk about that in a minute. So besides that, let me just repeat for you that it is extremely important that the new generation of engineering, petroleum engineers, is going to become fully immersed in very digital control techniques, making sure that they can actually work with the real-time monitoring response. And also, if there are patterns developing, like concentration increasing, something, be able to use machine learning techniques to actually respond to that. The blockchain technology, has been used in many industries now. Of course, the petroleum industry is adopting it, and by utilizing blockchain technology, you're actually improving cost and waste and optimizing your operation. So these are some of the technologies that come. In the area of subsurface sequestration, there's a lot of research going on in terms of geomechanics, in terms of solubility, in terms of interaction, long-term interaction of carbon dioxide with the environment. And so those of you who actually get involved in research and development in this area fantastic future because the pore spaces that we have created subsurface are tremendous amount of storage that we can use for, as long as we understand the mechanism. On the subject of repurposing the wells, U.S. has close to 4 million idle wells or actually close to abandoned wells. These are wells were drilled at some cost, and it would be plain to take the cavity of these wells and not to do anything about it, just pour cement and cap it and cut the casing and then walk away. So the whole question is that what can you do with these idle wells? Can you repurpose them? This is a very, very important area of research at other places. And I want to bring to your attention that you could actually, whether you for business purposes or whether for expertise that you can develop, you can get involved with some of these things. So if the brown represents the oil zone, and as long as you are able to isolate that cement, but there are multiple aquifers. These are saline aquifers, the oil producing and the fresh water that could be used in some dewatering for compressed air storage. Compressed air storage is going to solve a very major problem that the utilities have. Utilities in large scale batteries, and if the U.S. is going to become dependent on materials that you need, batteries, we're going to be a second world country. So it's important that the alternative solutions for energy storage rather than just simply focusing on the batteries. CO2 disposal, of course, would be another opportunity of using these idle and orphan wells. And then the other one is that it was mentioned earlier that you could use 2 horizontal wells for basically circulating cold water and getting hot water and going to meet to low basically binary cycle of geothermal. But we are actually looking at the opportunities that some of the wells that are 8,000 feet per meter, they can give you a temperature of about 180 degrees, 190 degrees Fahrenheit. And there are fluids that can actually boil at temperatures below that. And then, course, isobutane has been used for years as a binary fluid for the mid-temperature geothermal. Now you can use other fluids or maybe even isobutane in some cases that you can extract the heat at subsurface just by sending cold water and getting the hot water back and evaporating the binary fluid and actually making power out of it. So these wells have a purpose as long as we realize the importance of them and the opportunity that they can provide in terms of repurposing them for energy extraction, energy storage, or CO2. I just want to show you this diagram that shows you the power requirement for the batteries. You can see in the graph that's to the right, you can see that the minute you get to the levels that you would like to have storage time that would be more than a couple of hours, you really cannot depend on the batteries that was compressed air storage. We have used compressed air storage in the US, but that was mostly in the salt mine and all basically mining. But what we're saying is that you can actually use saline aquifer for that purpose, and we are actually doing an experiment that you will see right now with an operator who's. The bottom line is the following: that no company wants to spend money on abandonment because that's negative cash flow. So we are showing that there's a significant opportunity repurposing the wells and in fact even generating revenues for your wells that are ready to be abandoned because you become a storage operator or you generate it. So before you shut down these 4 million wells, it's a good idea to take a look at what can be done to repurpose. And as I mentioned, those of you students listening to the discussion, These are where the opportunities are. And each of you can get involved in many of these projects actually as an operator at some point, and actually provide a service that would not only satisfy some of the requirements that we have in terms of energy efficiency, but also making sure that you're providing the cash flows that are so badly needed in terms of abundant costs. Here's an example of compressed air, where basically even whether the power comes from renewable or the grid, you can go to the generator, making compressed air, compressed is injected, and then when you need it, you it back, it goes to the turbine, and the turbine displaces the water. This is like a water dam, and again you can make electricity. So you can see that we're talking about large scale of energy storage. So the goal is to take the curriculum that we have at various schools in the United States. Although most of my talk is really US centric, but some of this might apply to other countries as well. What can the PTE graduates learn on top of the courses that they're learning in terms of to be able to, as a new graduate, change the face of the industry, greenhouse gases? So if you focus on the incorporation of low carbon engineering, then the reservoir engineering courses definitely must include discussion of subsurface systems. The drilling must definitely include discussion about low carbon drilling. Same thing with production, operation, and design of surface facilities. Surface with the same thing with the question of real-time sensing. And then one of the biggest problems that the industry has had over years, that's what we have leaking abundant wells is in cement. Portland cement is not the right thing to do. There are lots of research going on in that area. We do some work in that area. So you can see that there's going to be innovations coming up to actually fix the cracked cements or cements that are conducting to some of the gases that make it surface. Alternatives to gas flaring must definitely be incorporated in the discussion that we have in production operation. And so you can see that by the time you take these concepts and you incorporate them into petroleum engineering, you're actually helping to generate a new list of graduates who can change the face of the industry. So the oil companies, I'm talking about the major oil companies, actually have made progress in this area. So if you look at the top, we talk about areas that focus. This is a list of the companies, Eni and Eni, Equinor, ExxonMobil, Royal Dutch Shell, and then Total, and then next page you have the BP and then you have Chevron. And the headings are very clear. They are working on beyond oil. They are working on low carbon technologies that are lowering emission, and then actually this sort of thing. We invest in renewable downstream electricity, renewable targets, working on renewable. So it's not that they are not addressing that, because after all, these oil and gas companies are energy companies, and they go where the market is. People demand solar; they want to put solar. And again, they are the one who have the distribution centers that they can actually contribute to making the energy sources available. So you will never go wrong by attaching yourself to this industry, because they are the one who actually control. Again, these are big companies and they have small companies, but they're the one who actually investing tremendously to the extent that the investment comes. So it is true that the change of the face of the industry is actually changes, but we have to realize that it is going to be the oil companies, petroleum companies that not only in the future will depend on the petroleum production, but also will get involved in the energy. I should mention about this center we started at USC, it's called the ESTED, which is the Energy Transition Center. And then we are working actually in focus areas, and you can see, we have a petroleum engineering program. You can see, and again, same thing is happening at the school. We are actually working carbon capture, hydrogen. That these are typical professors who are working. Dr. Prasanna is not even a petroleum engineer, he's an electrical engineer. But we managed to get that attention of professors from different departments to realize that the energy transition is something that all faculty, Priya Vashishta is actually material science engineering, Kelly Sanders in civil engineering, Brenda Joy is in petroleum engineering, Leo Chatsis is actually chemical engineering, Vishnu is petroleum engineering, Rama is material science. So what I'm trying to say is that while there has been a shifting in the past where most engineering graduates were looking at science as a field of the future, you cannot run any computer without energy, and you're gradually changing changing the system where actually other faculty are beginning to realize the opportunities for research, the opportunities for education, and making a future of the work in the energy and energy production. One of the important things we realize is public education, because eventually, when you get to the policies and decisions made about 2050, 2030, in many cases, decisions are made without looking at reality. So we've done this experiment every summer. We invite a bunch of science teachers and we talk about energy resources and energy transition. It's really amazing on the second day after they go through this discussion, what a change they have in their perspective about what is needed, what is to be done, what's the truth, and all that stuff. Now, how can we bring this to the level of public education? It really requires cooperation of or participation of the faculty, of the student, of the average public. And so we try to do that, and I know other schools try to do that, but this is absolutely critical because some decisions are made that I'm going to have a long-lasting negative impact on energy. So, number one, I think it's my duty and your duty, everybody's duty, to publicize that yes, the oil and gas industry is actually playing an important role in it. Do something about it. And then number two, we are the faculty, a number of meetings talking about these issues. We had a recent one at School of Mines actually talking about that. The faculty is actually incorporating these changes, and you can see that revised curriculum will actually have discussion more and more about how the new graduates can make a change in industry. And the important thing is that if you look at long range, based on all the forecasts, based on what is required, the fossil fuel will remain the key energy. In other words, it's not that tomorrow we can change the system. Fossil fuel will be a very important part of energy security. However, we cannot afford to send the CO2 to the atmosphere, and it's only the petroleum industry that has the expertise to get rid of that CO2. And so, fortunately, many companies are investing in low carbon operation, and then we want to make sure that the student community takes a very positive look and takes a look at this mission that they have, and you're going to be a game-changing community, and you're going to be changing the future of the U.S. and, for that matter, many countries. Thank you. If you have any question, please go ahead. Oh, I see 11 chat questions.
So, Dr. Ershaghi, there is a question. Someone asking about storage of carbon dioxide underground, as it will increase chances of having earthquake.
So there have been a couple of experiments done in Illinois in terms of CO2 storage, and that was wrong. I mean, they should have consulted the petroleum community. You never inject anything in a reservoir unless you depressurize it. Now we have years of experience in the industry for the gas storage. We've never had earthquake because of gas storage, because these are depleted reservoirs. Now, of course, if you want to store, for instance, CO2 in the saline aquifers, you got to depressurize the saline aquifer a little bit and go beyond. Fortunately, the water compressibility is not very high, so you can produce some water, depressurize the thing, and then inject. But if you don't want to do that, you just want to go ahead and inject, you want to have earthquake, of course. This is a very simple concept. So you have to depressurize the saline aquifer before you inject it. Next question. Okay, so there's a question about which fuel has the lowest carbon content. Of course, hydrogen. Okay. I don't see any more questions. If I can go up and down.
Well, Dr. Ershaghi, you must have answered all the questions. And presentation was very clear.
Okay, somebody says the voice is not clear.
No,
Okay.
I could hear it
If
well.
you know, Ershaghi at USC.edu, if you have any question, write it to me. All of your faculty, I mean, I should, by the way, mention that we have an organization of department head for petroleum engineering. Dr. Soliman is the head now. And then so you can direct your questions to him and or to me or to anybody you want in that organization. But we are
Or
here to help.
if they send the questions to the website of this conference, we'll make sure that they get forwarded to the right place.
Absolutely.
That's something we can do. And or they can email you directly, Dr. Ershaghi. That's their choice. But I've seen before we get questions after the presentation, since the presentation will be recorded and the students or audience in general have the chance to review it again, and they may come up with other questions as they see it the second time. But now we are right on time. I would like to thank you very much for your presentation and taking time out of your busy schedule to give us this presentation.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Appreciate that.
You're very welcome. Thank you for joining us. And please feel free to watch other talks that we have arranged.
Yes.
Thank you so much.